we didn't go into these negotiations asking what's good for us and the company. It wouldn't be give and take. It would just be us taking. And if it isn't already clear, UPS didn't give us any of this out of the kindness of their hearts. We fought for it and we won a lot and they lost a lot.
Welcome to Fight Back Radio, a production of fightbacknews.org, taking you to the heart of the people's struggle. I'm your host, Richard Berg, and today we're going to wrap up what's been a lot of our coverage on the Teamsters battle with the United Parcel Service. Many of you probably already know that the Teamsters have reached a tentative agreement, and as I'm recording here now, they're voting on that agreement. But our friends at the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, you may remember we broadcast a forum leading up to the potential strike. And they're doing another forum. They have done another forum, which we're going to rebroadcast today as our thing. It's basically saying, what is this settlement? What does it mean for the labor movement? And what does it mean for for socialists that work within the labor movement? And so I think you'll find this interesting. I think it's particularly interesting because of the deep roots that Freedom Road has in the Teamsters and in the labor movement, and that shows. While it's we encourage, as does Freedom Road, for socialists to go into the labor movement to get jobs at places like UPS. We did see a whole bunch of people do exactly that, but they some of them we hope stay and learn from this experience. But some of them, projected themselves after 6 months on the job as we're the leaders, and now they're saying, "Oh yeah, this isn't radical enough," or vote no. And I think this forum, has three leaders in the Teamsters, union stewards, people that have been there a long time, and give a more measured view that shows respect for the leaders of the Teamsters that have been there a long time, and they've become them themselves. So I think you'll enjoy this. Also, I think it gives some understanding of how this contract campaign at UPS and the Teamsters is a game changer. I think this is probably the most important thing that's happened in the labor movement this year, and probably in a long, long time. For the Teamsters, it's a changing of directions at their largest employer and at the largest private sector contract held with a single employer in the country. And so it goes from years and years of concessions to turning that around. And so they'll talk more about that, so you don't need to hear me talk about it. So here now is the Freedom Road Socialist Organization forum on the Teamster settlement.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this event on class for Unionism and the tentative agreement at UPS. My name is Cherrene Horazuk. I am a longtime union activist. I've been a member of my local at the University of Minnesota for the past 19 years. I am the president of my union. I have been the chief steward. I have been the vice president for organizing, and I've led bargaining for probably the last 8 or 10 rounds of bargaining. In addition, though, a way that I don't often introduce myself, but in addition to being a trade union leader, I am also the chair of the Labor Commission of Freedom Road Socialist Organization, and I will be moderating the event tonight. We're going to be hearing from three Teamster rank and file leaders who work at UPS, who will be talking about the tentative agreement at UPS that was just reached with 240,000 workers represented under the contract. Members of Teamsters are voting through the 22nd on the tentative agreement. And we want to hear again from rank and file leaders with their perspective on the contract, as well as talking about what class struggle unionism is and what are the next steps moving forward. as I said, my name is Cherrene Horazuk. We'll be hearing from Jared Hamill, Jenny Beckenstein, and Bill Hernandez. The event will be about an hour long. It is going to be recorded and will also be broadcast on Fight Back Radio on the podcast. So I encourage everybody, if you haven't listened to the Fight Back Radio podcast, to please check it out. There are a lot of great podcasts, episodes that have been done on the UPS contract campaign in particular. We've heard from a number of leaders, and the first round of discussion with this group of activists is also an episode on Fight Back Radio. So I just really want to encourage people to look for it and listen to it and share it with friends. So as I said, we're going to be talking about the tentative agreement that was reached between Teamsters and UPS, but also put it into a broader perspective. And I'll say, as someone who has been who led a strike of 3,000 clerical, technical, and healthcare workers at the University of Minnesota in 2007, which was one of less than a dozen strikes that took place in the country that year. It is definitely stunning to see where things went with UPS and the contract campaign that was organized in such a strong way around the country. 240,000 workers militantly standing up and fighting back for better pay and better working conditions, and was something that the labor movement and really the entire country was watching. And we're going to hear about that tentative agreement, the strengths and weaknesses of it, and some perspectives, as I said, going forward. What we do know, though, is that contracts will never represent what we deserve. They only represent what we can wrestle away from the bosses. They also represent, though, concessions that are forced on us by the bosses. And at times, they represent the agreements that are forced on us by the do-nothing sellouts and the leadership who've run most of our unions for far too long. And so, we have to think about what we can do above and beyond what is in a union contract, right? We know that there are things that are really good, and we're going to hear about some of the major wins that came about in the UPS contract. But we know that we need something more than that. As a good friend of mine once put it, we need to think about more than just the revolutionary struggle for the just distribution of overtime. We need to think about how workers and oppressed people need more than just a kinder, gentler form of capitalism. We need more than good contracts. We need a system where society is in the hands of those who produce the wealth. What we need is socialism, right? And what we know is that a contract campaign isn't going to get us there. It's going to get us a good contract, but we need something more than that. We need an organization that really is about fighting, not just on the shop floor, but is about fighting for improvements in society as a whole, and really is about fighting for the complete turning over and turning upside down the society and the way it's functioning. And instead of it being the capitalist class that's ruling it and oppressing people on a daily basis, needs to be the workers who are in charge. And Freedom Road Socialist Organization is about bringing about that revolutionary struggle. We have a long and I think very proud history of organizing within the labor movement, within trade unions as rank and file activists, but also within the broader movements as a whole. And we see, our strategy is about building a united front against monopoly capitalism, and within that, a strategic alliance between the multinational working class and oppressed nationality movements at our core. We know that capitalism in the U.S. was founded on stolen land, based on the labor of slaves and stolen lives. And as Marx said, labor in white skin cannot be free as long as in black skin it is oppressed. And so we see the strategic alliance between the working class, the multinational working class and oppressed nationality movements is at the core of the struggle that we have. So we're also going to hear in the discussion today about what some of the gains have been in terms of fighting against national oppression on the shop floor. And we're going to talk about class struggle unionism, what exactly it means. Our strategy within the labor movement as Freedom Road Socialist Organization is to build class struggle unionism, to build the militant minority, to identify those who recognize that the fundamental battle that we're waging every day in the workplace is a battle against our bosses. It's a fight on the shop floor, that there is no common interest that the working class and the owning class have, that the bosses and workers have on the shop floor or within the system. We work every day to build those fights on the shop floor, and again, to fight the bosses, but not just fight the bosses. Sometimes we have to fight the union bureaucrats who want to go along to get along, who want to collaborate with the bosses, and sometimes we have to fight them. If they're willing to fight the boss, we'll stand beside them, but if they're not, we will fight them as well. And we want to identify the militant minority within the workplace that really recognize the need to fight the system as a whole, not just fight for improvements in one workplace, but really to fight for improvements in society as a whole. Our approach is building class struggle, which means that, again, there's a fundamental difference between the bosses and the workers. It's us versus them. There is no such thing as interest-based bargaining. The contract we see as a temporary truce, and that's all it is. We have to fight every day to win all that can be won, to raise the consciousness of workers on the shop floor, and to build organization and win people over to socialism. We recognize in class struggle unionism that workers need to lead our own struggles, it's about rank and file militancy. It is not about staffers from the local or the council or the international telling us what to do, but it's about workers really defining what we need and what our battles are, and building those rank and file movements and shop floor struggles, determining who controls what's going on. It's about union democracy. And again, it's about a class stance, that this is a bigger battle between labor and capital. Finally, our strategy within labor is to concentrate, which means that we need to work together to build a broader fight, to build a strategic approach, assess conditions, and work together in developing those fights. Again, winning all that can be won, to strike blows against the enemy and build organization and consciousness. This has been a long-term strategy for Freedom Road Socialist Organization. As long as we've been doing labor work, we've been sending people into the labor movement as rank and file activists. Our comrades are about sinking deep roots, about building fights for the long term, not just getting a job and then, pushing for a strike or participating in one contract campaign. But it's about building long-term strategies. And we know that the contract campaign at UPS was just one part of a bigger battle. And our comrades who work at UPS are going to continue that fight long past this current contract campaign. And we really want to invite all of you, if you're not a part of the Road Socialist Organization, to consider joining us. We are a group of fighters on the shop floor and in the labor movement as a whole, and in the broader movements for justice in the United States. And if that's what you're interested in, then we really encourage you to join us. There's some links in the chat. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our speakers. Again, our first speaker is going to be Jared Hamill. He is a package car driver and elected Teamster shop steward in LA. He's worked at UPS for more than 11 years. He's also a member of Freedom Road Socialist Organization and is a part of our labor commission. When he's not organizing, he spends most of his time with his wife and daughter enjoying hiking and the outdoors. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jared, and then I'll introduce Jenny and Nico before they speak. So let's give a great welcome to Jared Hamill.
Thank you, Cherrene. And I'll just start with this. This will be my, I believe, fourth contract that I've gone through at UPS. I've been there over 11 years, so it's been a while. But I'll start with this, is like, after kind of the recent history, is after weeks of practice picketing across the country, thousands of workers, poured into the streets outside their hubs, outside their gates. Major rallies in New York City, in Chicago, and Los Angeles, all with President Sean O'Brien there. He came to our hub a couple of weeks back. And after all that struggle, that people were doing, the company came back to the table and they were ready to reach an agreement. And that happened on July 25th. So, as part of the 340,000 workers at UPS, we put a lot of pressure on the company, to the point where we were about a week away from walking out and bringing this company to a halt, and also the economy as well, because UPS is such a big part of the economy. So, July 25th happened. It was a Tuesday. And so for me and my center, all the drivers around, there was a real sense of victory in our center. And, this is coming from a year out, where we were getting out there, we were flyering, we were tabling, meeting, picketing, and of course, rallying. And, it kind of was like this moment where we said, when we fight, we win. So for those who have been around UPS more than a few years, we saw this contract as something a lot different than what we were used to. This time around, we actually had a campaign that never happened before. As a reformer in the Teamsters, we actually worked with the leadership of the IBT, and we were working together on this contract campaign. That's something that never happened before either. And so the other big thing about it too is that there was an actual real threat of a strike. That never happened under the previous administration, under Hoffa Jr. That never happened. But I'll say this is, it didn't happen overnight. Okay. This was part of a historic struggle against concessions at UPS and against leaders in the union with no drive and no willingness to take on the boss. In 2018, the Hoffa administration rammed through a contract that was actually voted down, but it was still rammed through. The rank and file was outraged. And so what we did was we mobilized to oust the administration, and we got rid of the do-nothing leaders. We got rid of Hoffa and elected O'Brien and Zuckerman along with the Teamsters United Coalition slate. And so the rank and file drove this. They drove the contract campaign to beat back those concessions from year after year after year, to raise wages, benefits for all the Teamsters, part-time and full-time. And this campaign brought more folks into this fight than I've ever seen in my entire time at UPS. And it raised the bar, and it raised expectations for folks. So what did we win? We've got two part-timers on the panel too, so I'll just kind of speak on what did we win as full-time and what did we win as drivers. So the biggest concession that we beat back was implemented in the 2018 contract, and that was a second class of drivers called the 22-4s. The 22-4s they got less pay and they got less rights. They forced overtime. They had no protections against forced overtime. But I'm proud to say there are no more. This contract beat back the second tier. Another big concession was for drivers being forced in on a sixth day. That, especially during the pandemic, 2021 and on, we were forced to come in 6 days a week, and it's very tiring, exhausting, physically and mentally. And so I can say now that is no more as well. So those are two big concessions from our previous contract that we got rid of. But it wasn't just about beating back concessions. It was also about moving forward, bringing people forward, and seeing what else we could win. The other big thing was air conditioning in the trucks. Most people know, you see the UPS driver driving down the street, they've always got the doors open because there's no AC. It's extremely hot in there. And even in the back, it's like an oven. So it can be like 130 degrees. You're slow roasting in there. And so we actually were able to win air conditioning for, they're going to start implementing it in like the extra hot zones within the United States, which is like the Southwest, for instance. But we got that. We never had that before. We improved language for the reduction of overtime. We have some language in the West on bringing in part-timers to go into feeder before hiring off the street. Another big thing as a shop steward, we're constantly under the pressure of the company to move and deliver these packages, and they use technology to do it. We've got these computer things called dyads where they have GPS, they send you messages, they can tell everything about your day. And so what the company likes to do is they like to use the information from this technology and from cameras and from all the other things that they have and use it to discipline us and harass us into moving faster. One of the things that we won in this contract is that we are no longer able to be disciplined based on that technology alone, which is a major win. And as a steward who's in the office every day, trying to defend coworkers from something that a computer says, this is a big win. So we can throw out that discipline automatically. And of course, the other big thing is the wages. Wages, I'm sure we'll hear about wages for part-timers, but also for drivers too. We're getting $7.50 over the life of the contract. It puts us close to $50 an hour by the end of the contract. And that's a major thing, for folks that obviously who doesn't want more money, right? So through this fight, we won a lot of things. Was it everything? No, of course not. Cherrene spoke about, it's a temporary truce between classes. And that's definitely true. I'm confident most folks, when we're voting on it currently, most people will say yes because of the things that we did win. But there are a few folks that say that it's not enough. And, in a lot of ways, they're right in the sense that, UPS made $14 billion in profit last year, all of which is ours. But there's a question of how much can be won under a union contract and so on and so forth. And how much people are able to hold out during a strike, and for how much are they willing to settle for how long are they able to do it. So I think, we really raised the bar for folks, for our coworkers, and into a fight that we haven't seen ever. And for the veteran, coworkers, they haven't seen it in over 25 years. So I'll say, we as Teamsters and as revolutionaries, we need to remember that, just like the struggle against concessions brought us to this point today, we have to remember that the struggle continues, and that the struggle in the Teamsters and the labor movement moves us closer to ending exploitation of one class over another for tomorrow. So I just want to say thank you, everybody, for having me, and I'm looking forward to answering any questions, and thank you.
Thank you, Jared, for sharing that information and your perspective. Our next speaker, I'm really pleased to introduce Jenny Beckenstein. She's a 2-year Teamster out of Local 396 in Los Angeles, and is also a UPS part-timer and shop steward on the preload shift, and a proud member of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. Before Jenny worked at UPS, she worked at an Amazon warehouse, and has also been helping in the fight to organize Amazon workers with her Teamster local. So let's give it up to Jenny, who's going to be talking about her experiences at UPS.
Thank you. Cool. Well, you both already took all my points. But yeah, I'm going to talk about the economic gains we won for part-timers. But first, I just wanted to say again that as class struggle unionists, we recognize that we as workers have nothing in common with our boss, in this case, UPS. And negotiations are a great example of that conflict, because what's good for us in our contract is bad for UPS and vice versa. So we didn't go into these negotiations asking what's good for us and the company. No, we were very clear that we would not have the cost neutral negotiations that UPS wanted. It wouldn't be give and take. It would just be us taking, because this is after years of concessionary contracts. So I'm glad that our negotiations were combative and that we organized ourselves in our hubs and nationally to demand more and not settle for concessions. And if it isn't already clear, UPS didn't give us any of this out of the kindness of their hearts. We fought for it and we won a lot and they lost a lot. So for part-timers, basically this contract fight, the main demand was around part-timers. Part-time pay had been too low for too long, since 1982, which was 40 years ago. Part-time pay had only increased by $7.25. So we were already starting from a bad place, where most part-timers were making minimum wage. So what we won, and all of the wages depend on years with the company, but we won between around $7 to $9 increases over 5 years, which is around 33% to 55% increases. For example, I was at $16.65, which is minimum wage in LA, and I'm going immediately to 21, and then by the end of the contract, I'll be at 25.75. And people who have been with the company longer, they'll be much higher because they're already starting from a higher place. This was also the first time ever that we got longevity raises. So for part-timers who have been with the company more than 5, 10, or 15 years at different rates, they got extra raise for their years of service. And that was one of the biggest demands, especially because we were so high behind in wages. These were definitely the largest raises, both in dollars and percentages ever, but we still do have a lot of catching up to do. And there are a lot of people who are unhappy that we didn't get $25 an hour. And as class struggle unionists, we don't believe there is a fair day's pay for a fair day's work, because the CEOs and shareholders of UPS are making so much more off of us every day than what we're getting paid. So in that sense, even 25 isn't enough, 30 isn't enough. We all deserve way more because we work for it. So while this may be the best contract UPS workers have ever gotten, and one of the best union contracts probably negotiated in the US, it doesn't mean that we aren't still being exploited as workers. A union contract could never eliminate exploitation under capitalism, because exploitation is the main feature of capitalism. It's what keeps the capitalists going, keeps them rich and powerful. So, of course, we want the whole pie because we work for it. We made the pie, so we should get the whole thing. But we would need to overthrow capitalism in order to get that whole pie, which, if you're interested in doing that, we should talk later. But onwards to the other economic gains for part-timers, most importantly, we won more full-time jobs. So we can't survive off of part-time hours. We would need second and third jobs. So we want full-time jobs. We want the higher pay that comes with it, more job security, stable hours, stable schedule, which is good for parents and people who can't go driving for whatever reason. We want more inside full-time jobs. And again, the company benefits by having so many part-timers. With high turnover, we don't benefit from that. We want those full-time jobs for Teamsters. But in the meantime, there's still going to be a lot of part-timers at UPS. So another thing we won is the ability to do seasonal support work. So that means delivering packages out of our own cars at starting driver rate, which with like mileage reimbursement, insurance, all of that during the holidays. This is more money for us. And if you work in the logistics industry, you know we make a lot of money during the holidays. It sucks because we don't get the time off that a lot of jobs or a lot of people do at other jobs, but it's the industry we work in, and definitely something people depend on to budget over the year. And UPS was already having people deliver out of their cars during the holidays or during peak season. But it was given out to people off the street. So it wasn't given to Teamsters. It was just random, anybody with a car, basically. And this was especially bad this year because that was people learning the routes and learning the methods of delivering, which this year would have meant those would have been the first people who would scab during our strike because they'd already be better at the job than someone who hadn't done it before. So that was a big issue. And it's not perfect. Like, we would just want more driver jobs, but at least that work is going to us now rather than people who aren't Teamsters. The last thing I'll talk about for economic gains is supervisors working. So in our contract, only union members are allowed to do our work, not supervisors. That's our hours, our jobs. So we already had that, but they do work all the time. It's very annoying. We can't do anything to stop. Well, we can do things to stop them, but they are relentless because it saves them money. So they do it. Now we have a higher penalty for it, which is 4 times whoever files the grievance pay for the amount of time that the supervisor works, which can be a lot of money. If the supervisor works for a whole day, that's 4 days of pay that we're asking for. So hopefully that gets them to stop working and either give us the hours or create more Teamster jobs. And if it doesn't, then at least we get like a higher penalty for it and get to get back at the company for it. So these are just some of our economic gains. We have a lot of non-economic gains that we won as part-timers that improve our working conditions and seniority day to day. But Nico's going to talk all about that. I just want to say, as has already been said, we believe it was this member-led fight that won us everything we won in this contract. If you work at UPS, you know that the contract campaign has been the talk of the town at work for over a year. And as union activists, we always want as many people as possible to participate and take up any struggle, whether it be for an issue in our hub, like more fans or against harassment, or for something like this, like a larger contract fight that we just had. And we want to use tactics that actually work. So for the contract fight, obviously, we know our best tactic is a strike, or in our case, a credible strike threat. And our fight was on the shop floors across the country. And it was done mostly in front of management. It wasn't on Zoom. It wasn't on Facebook. It was at work through union huddles, parking lot meetings, actions, rallies, like the practice pickets, all to unite people around the issues we are fighting for. So that we would have that credible strike threat with members ready to hit the street August 1st. And I would say that we were ready. Through all of our activity, people were overwhelmingly ready to strike by July. People were preparing for it. People were actually excited for it. People were disappointed that we didn't end up striking. And even the company knew it because a few weeks into July, they started training our supervisors to become drivers in the case of a strike. So they were ready. The public and the media knew it and were blowing up about it. So with all this pressure, the company was scared to death of a strike. And in that way, we basically forced them to give into our demands. And I think Jared said it, but importantly, this fight got so many people involved, and that's what will make us a stronger union going forward. So, for example, we're always in a battle with UPS to enforce our contract because they constantly violate it. And to enforce it, we need a lot of member participation. So keeping up this momentum will help us to enforce what we want and fight for even more in our next contract. And so lastly, a larger goal of this contract fight was to build a broader fighting labor movement. So we want all workers to participate in the fight against the corporations that exploit us. And through this contract fight, we showed other unions and other workers how to do that. So I'm a member organizer with my local, and we've already had workers from other industries see what we want and how we want it and want to do the same in their workplaces. So they're looking at our new contract as inspiration to demand more from their bosses. So hopefully we'll see more militancy going forward and more wins for the working class.
Thank you, Jenny. Our next speaker that we're going to hear from before the discussion is Nico Hernandez. Nico is a part-time shifter and package cover driver in Jacksonville, Florida. He's worked at UPS for 3 years and has been involved in TDU and his local union since day one. He's the youngest elected member of the TDU steering committee and the only part-timer on that committee. He campaigned extensively for the 512 Teamsters United slate in Jacksonville to reform his local union, and later for the Oz slate to bring back militant unionism in the International, working on vacation and sleeping in his car to campaign all over Illinois in addition to campaigning in Jacksonville. He's a true fighter who believes in rank and file power and the need to build a militant labor movement. Take it away, Nico.
All righty. Thank you for the intro, Cherrene. I'm glad you all left me with the non-economic portion, because I think that's honestly the most important portion that we want in this contract. Wages only do you so much. What I believe we should be fighting for as socialists and trade unionists is dignity. Dignity and respect in the workplace. I think for myself, that's by far the most important thing that we get as workers. We do all the work at this company and in the country, and to be able to have dignity and respect in the workplace is really the most important thing to me. After 25 years of concessions, we finally have a contract that we can call a good contract. We've been fighting for a long time to get reform leadership in the International, and I believe through this contract fight, we've really shown what our model of organizing leads to, and it leads to a contract that we can all actually be proud of. The business unionists love to say that, it's a give and take process in bargaining, and they're right. They're right. We give them our labor, and we take everything that we deserve, and that's the proper vision that the Oz slate managed to promulgate through these negotiations, and I think they did a certainly an admirable job. Even Wall Street seemed to think so, because the stock price, as soon as the TAs dropped and the economics were made clear, UPS's forecast for their economics dropped, and their stock did as well, which I was very proud of to see right after this hard contract fight. I'd like to go into Article 17, which any UPSer will know very intimately is the paid for time article. The company loves to chip away at how much money we make through stealing. They love to intentionally undercut your time. They love to take 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there to make their numbers look better. And we received some fairly strong new language on Article 17. It makes it so the company will have to pay increased penalties for part-timers and full-timers. They'll have to pay those penalties sooner, and which will substantially help our members in actually getting paid correctly. Also, a new payroll system 2 years into the contract will have to be implemented, where we'll be able to see exactly when we clock in, where we clock out, any edits made by management team, when and why, which will be really substantial for getting these grievances paid out and hopefully getting the managers that illegally love to steal our time fired. Article 37, we received some changes in terms of how much penalty pay we can get for harassment grievances. SurePost, we managed to increase the amount of Teamster job by thousands by decreasing the amount of subcontracting allowed in the contract by giving packages to the postal office. Subcontracting for feeder. Now, this is pretty substantial. We had this language negotiated in the 2018 contract where we allowed the company to create 2,000 new sleeper team jobs, and then after that, they were allowed to unlimitedly subcontract across the entire network, as long as those 2,000 jobs stayed in effect and as long as any feeder driver with more than 3 years of seniority is working. We got rid of that language completely, and we made it so that no feeder driver may be laid off while a run is being subcontracted, which is very substantial. We added gender identity and sexual orientation to the protected categories in the contract, making those illegal to discriminate against. Change of operations. So if the company creates a new building within the area of a local jurisdiction, the company is forced to hire from the existing Teamsters within the area before they're allowed to go off the street. And in addition, they're forced to pay those Teamsters that they hire, they're forced to pay for their moving expenses, which is going to help a lot of folks that are in areas where companies love to change around, make their operations more efficient, and thereby screwing over members. Now we have the opportunity to take those jobs and the company has to pay for any lodging expenses, moving expenses, and all that. FMLA. Previously, the company was able to take all but 1 week of your vacation if you had medical issues that required you to take Family Medical Leave Act. We doubled that to 2 weeks in this contract. It's not perfect, but that's something that I'm happy about as someone who has to be on FMLA for the company. It's really important to me to actually also be able to take my vacations as necessary, because it's not just your physical health that matters, also your mental health, be able to stay well at work and be able to have the dignity of like being owed those vacations for putting in the amount of hours that we do at this company. Lactation facilities. The company has to provide private facilities for all mothers who have to lactate work, which is a really big issue that I was seeing brought up a lot, and I'm really happy that got addressed. Part-timers. Now we get to transfer without having to pretend to go to college, which is wonderful. Previously, you had to sign up for college classes, and it was this whole rigmarole with transfer. It was nasty and unnecessary, and thankfully that language has changed. Now part-timers are allowed to transfer for any reason to any location with an open job. Supervisors. Now they have to wear, not only do they have to wear name tags, but they also have to wear their complete identification with their picture to make sure that they're not doing any funky stuff in regards to that. Something that's really important for me in the South. Lots of parts of the country have decent local unions. For me, we don't. Our local union loves to sell it to the company. They give them side deals all the time. And this new language in the national contract is really important to that. National language that only applies to the national contract, may be forwarded directly to the national grievance panel. That may not sound like much, but for us, who has been those in the South and those with regressive local unions, that's substantial. That means that national language will actually get enforced, as opposed to these sell-out side agreements that the sell-out local unions like to make with the company. So I'm really excited about that. Another one for us in this in right-to-work states, there's a new electronic member form that's going to be given to members at the point of application for hiring. So the idea of the union and the paperwork is all going to be simplified, creating less burden on local unions to have to sign up members every single week in, week out. Let's simplify that process a lot. This is the first time since the creation of the National Master Contract that we've received a new paid holiday. At least for us in the South, this is the very first time. MLK Day is now a paid holiday across the country. A very substantial change for those of us that respect the work of Dr. Martin Luther King. It's a really important day for workers as well. I think I've covered everything. Back to you, Cherrene.
All right. Thank you, Nico. And another shout out as well to Jenny and Jared for your contributions for the event tonight. We have a number of questions that have come up in the chat that we're going to dive into now. We've got a number of questions that have come up in the chat, some which have kind of specifically to do with some of the terms of the agreement, and some which have to do with kind of broader assessments and next steps. So I think what I'll do is go into the kind of the nitty-gritty of the agreement first, and just if we could just answer these briefly and then look at the bigger picture. I think that would be great. And so there's a question around the PVDs and SSDs, and whether or not kind of how that's going to work out, and is the agreement that was reached related to these a good thing, or is it a concession? How do y'all view that? So let's start with that question.
I can start.
Great.
SSDs, I'm not sure what that is, but PVDs, that was a big issue going into the contract fight, was getting rid of PVDs, people delivering out of their personal vehicles. And then it's like a Honda Civic, somebody driving in a Honda Civic and filling it full of, 30 packages or something like that. Anyways, the goal was to get rid of it, but I think that was one of those things that kind of came up short. And so obviously during peak season, the company hires like a bunch of people. Somebody said golf carts. I did golf cart I don't know, like 12 years ago or something like that. But anyways, over here in Los Angeles, we don't have golf carts, thank God, get run over or something. But so the current language is it allows for people to be off the street. They can be used at delivering in their own personal vehicles, and they are not Teamsters. They're just temporary workers. So though we weren't able to get rid of the PVDs altogether, the language now coming forward is that it's offered to the part-time workforce first. So though I wouldn't consider it a concession because it's actually moving forward, but it is not elimination of PVDs altogether. So,
Jenny or Nico, did you want to add to this, or should we move on to the next question?
I'd just like to add a little bit. I mean, none of us are happy that PVDs they still exist. We all wanted to remove them this contract. Even O'Brien said in the two-man meetings that there was two things that we didn't get in negotiations that he really wanted. He wanted to shorten the progression, and he really wanted to get rid of PVDs. Did we win everything in this contract? No. To be frank, we didn't. Did we win everything that could be won? I believe we did. And we reversed so many years of just dog shit contracts, 25 years of concessions, and we made miraculous gains. I hate PVDs. I'll be honest with you. I can't stand them taking our work and bastardizing it into Uber Eats. But giving that work first to our already existing part-time workforce and allowing them to get the experience that they need to go out and become good delivery drivers, and building that that system whereby the workers already are getting that experience necessary to go on and become package car drivers in the future, I think is a good win. It's not everything, but I'm happy that it's the way it is now as opposed to the way it was in 2018 through 2023.
Right. We have another question as well regarding the fight for holidays, and I know that Nico mentioned this, that MLK is now a holiday. Was there a inclusion of other holidays in the demands? Is there a plan to do so in the future? Does anyone want to speak to that point?
I think going into this contract was the fight for Juneteenth and MLK. Obviously to express solidarity to our African American coworkers, and for Martin Luther King, who was in Teamsters represent a lot of sanitation workers as well. Our local has a lot of sanitation workers, and he was assassinated I believe a day after the sanitation strike in Memphis, if I recall correctly. It was a Teamster strike line. So something to honor his legacy, but also for all our coworkers who are oppressed at work. Was AFSCME. I'm sorry. So Cherrene, I apologize. So I would say obviously it's a stepping stone, for other holidays as well. There's we've never, I can't recall the last time we've included an extra holiday. So it's something that, we could obviously use for, the next upcoming contracts. So I'll leave it at that.
Right. Thank you, Jared. I have a question for Jenny from the chat. If you could speak to some of your experiences with gender-based discrimination at UPS, and if there were demands that came up within the contract fight related to this, and some of the benefits through a kind of gendered analysis.
Sure. Yeah. We in our last webinar, we covered it more, so I didn't talk too much about it. But well, first off, just to say, every workplace has issues with gender discrimination in the U.S. And we deal with it just the same at UPS. Of course, it's a mostly male-dominated industry, especially at the driver level. So we won. Nico described it, the anti-gender discrimination clause, for whatever that is worth. Hopefully something, if anything comes up. And then also the breastfeeding, ability to breastfeed in a private space and on the clock during work. But for us as part-timers, or basically part-time pay, I would say is a women's issue, because there's a larger percentage of women who are part-timers at UPS than are drivers, for many reasons, mostly just because of the irregular scheduling and commitment of driving. It's very unpredictable. So if you're a single mom or any mom, and you have to take care of your kids at a certain time, it's really hard to go driving and be able to balance all of that. So the fact that part-timers were making so much less, and that the majority of the women were part-timers or are part-timers, that made the part-time pay a women's issue. And that's also why we wanted to fight for more part-time pay, and also more full-time inside jobs, because the inside jobs have a much more regular schedule. You know what time you're in and out. They actually kick you out after 8 hours, unlike drivers. So that could also be beneficial for women who are responsible for childcare in their families.
Thank you, Jenny. We've had a number of questions that have come up about keeping up momentum following the contract campaign. And I want to ask our panelists to comment on that. But I want to also share a quote from Elizabeth Gurley Flynn about how you assess a strike. And though this wasn't a strike, it was a very militant contract campaign that took it right to the edge of a strike. And one of the things that Gurley Flynn, the rebel girl and revolutionary trade unionist, said was, "What is a labor victory? I maintain it as a twofold thing. Workers must gain economic advantage, but they must also gain revolutionary spirit in order to achieve a complete victory. For workers to gain a few more cents a day, a few minutes less a day, and go back to work with the same psychology, the same attitude towards society, is to have achieved a temporary gain and not a lasting victory." And so for Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, it was really about one of the most important things was about raising the consciousness of workers and raising the level of militancy. So it's not just about what are the concrete gains that might come about in any given contract, but how can you transform how people think about things? And so what I'd like to do is ask our panelists, like, there was clearly a lot of a momentum that was put forward, that was built during the contract campaign. How do you keep that going? I know from being in, both going out on strike, but also organizing contract campaigns, people get really motivated, and then you get the new contract and folks can kind of move back into just kind of the same old. How do you ensure that the fight continues and that people's consciousness actually does change going forward? What is your assessment on that? And I'll call on Jared first.
Yeah, I think as leaders in the workplace, we have a responsibility to keep the momentum alive too. We've got a new contract coming in, and I think we know something's for sure, is that the company will violate it. The company will try and do whatever they can to bend the rules, break the rules, et cetera, et cetera. And so for those hard fought things that, we really care for, all sorts of things, we need to make sure that the contract is enforced. And we need to also be thinking too, is that, the folks that were really active during the campaign, we need to get them to step up and say, look, we need to enforce the contract. We need, them to abide by the thing that they signed too. And for other folks too, we want them to become stewards. We want them, to become workplace leaders as well. And so we just can't let that momentum die and, keep it going.
Jenny, I'll call on you next to answer.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't fight for this contract for nothing, because like Jared said, the company will violate it. Even with our concessionary contracts, they constantly violate the contract. It's a constant battle. And we do need people to help with it. if no one's active in your building, then the company is going to get away with a lot more. But if you have an active workforce and people who know the contract and are willing to like speak up and speak against any violations and continue that fight against the boss, I think that's how we keep people involved, because it's not like we fight for a year and then take 4 years off. Not at UPS. The struggle continues at UPS. The struggle never ends, because their UPS management is just, they're shameless in how they disrespect both the workforce and the contract that we fought for, or the contracts that we have. But that's just talking to people about that helps people, I think, people understand that because we see it every day. So I think just continuing to mobilize around different issues, whatever is going on, that's how we keep it up. And then in 4 years, we'll start all over for our next contract.
Nico?
Yeah, I'd just like to mention that a contract is only as good as its enforcement. If you have a contract that isn't enforced, you don't have a contract. The writing only gets you so far. And a union without membership involvement isn't a union. That's really our task, is to build the union on the shop floor and to enforce the contract that we have. If we don't do those two things, then this entire fight will have been for nothing. It's really important that we get people involved, we get people fighting, get people filing grievances, we get people marching on the boss, and we make sure that these wins that we won at the negotiating table don't get lost on the shop floor.
All right. Thank you. We're going to wrap up in just a few minutes, but I want to, we've got a couple more questions here. How can we use these wins to organize Amazon? That was a large part of some of the messaging, especially early on, but throughout. How are people assessing it now?
Yeah, I think that was a big idea of this contract fight, was to have a big public campaign that everyone was paying attention to. Because we spoke about it a little bit. We don't have a very active labor movement in our country in terms of seeing workers stand up and demand more from their employers. So I think both in the campaign, we kind of showed other people how to do that, other workers how to do that. And in our contract, we have so much, already like a lot of workers in other industries or in the same industry at different companies are looking at our contract and being like, yeah, I want that. Because Amazon drivers, they're still making like $19 an hour, nowhere close to what we want in this contract. And they have horrible safety conditions, both drivers and inside the warehouses. And yeah, there's just a lot to win there. And they are definitely paying attention to what's going on at UPS. I think a lot of workers in different industries are, because we did raise the bar. And I think, people are going to see that and obviously see that it's possible to organize for that.
Thank you. I want to ask all three of you if you could comment on this question about what's next. Where do you see things going for rank and file militants on the shop floor at UPS? And where do you see things going for Freedom Road activists and organizers at UPS?
I'll go first. Look, we got a lot of work to do. Not just as, rank and file, activists and the unions, but if we really want to change society, we need to be thinking about something bigger than a union contract or a tentative agreement or organizing this workplace or that workplace. We have to take this momentum from now and find other folks that want to join in this fight that's a lot bigger than just a trade union fight. We need to unite with, the other fights and movements going on in the United States, because we all have a common enemy. And so I think it's something to think about. Is we meet people on the shop floor and they're they get exposed to this struggle, and their eyes get open, their consciousness is raised, and we need to continue that and bring them forward. So I think it's kind of a twofold thing. Obviously, we continue struggling in the unions and continue struggling for better contracts, but we got to find people along the way.
Yeah, I think it was awesome, or it's awesome that so many workers at UPS stood up and were ready to strike for more, and kind of raised their level of consciousness, their level of consciousness through that process. And I think, especially right now, just like how people's different reactions to the contract, I think it's a good thing that people do have high expectations and want even more. And I think that is a good opportunity for people to fight for more, like inside the workplace and outside the workplace, and fight for change in society where we actually could have a fair contract. But that would only be under socialism. So yeah, I think that's another way we move forward right now and keep up the momentum, is to kind of summate that with people, and kind of explain why we didn't win everything that we wanted.
From where do we go from here? We continue to do what we've already been doing. We build militancy on the shop floor. We enforce the contract that we already have. We, show people that trade unions can only go so far, and that we need to fight for more, because as workers, we always deserve more. Hopefully, as Teamsters, hopefully we'll leverage this victory in a couple ways. Hopefully by the new operations at FedEx, they're merging their operations, and it seems that they're going to be classified under the National Labor Relations Act now, as opposed to the Railway Labor Act. Hopefully be able to do some organizing at that massive competitor, because their standards are undercutting our wages and the wages of the entire industry. And in addition, Amazon, who's an existential threat to the work that we do through their model of paying people crap, and the ultimate Uberification of the job. These existential threats really need to be addressed if we're going to really build the industry and our union and fight for the class in the ways that we need to.
Thank you, Nico. With that, I think we will wrap up this event. I really want to thank all of you for joining us. In particular, I want to thank Jared and Jenny and Nico for sharing their perspectives on the contract fight at UPS and what it means. And I want to again just encourage you, if you are a Teamster, if you work at UPS, if you were a trade unionist, if you're a member of the working class, think about joining Freedom Road Socialist Organization. If you want to find out more about what our strategy is within the labor movement in particular, there are a couple of great pamphlets that are on our webpage: Class Struggle on the Shop Floor, a strategy for a new generation of socialists in the U.S., and the strategic alliance between the workers' movement and the Black liberation movement and the struggle for community control of the police, which is lessons from our fights in Chicago. And we, again, as an organization, we are about building shop floor fights and long-term struggles within our unions to transform them and put them on a class struggle basis. We also recognize that simply having good unions that build fights and win better contracts than what we currently have is not enough for the working class. It is not enough for really bringing about change in society. And in order to do that, we need revolutionary organization. We need socialist organization, and that is what we are about building as the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. And if that's something that you're interested in as well and want to work shoulder to shoulder, I really invite you to join us. And there's a link in the chat. We're going to continue having forums like this, and I invite you to join us for them. If you have friends or family, loved ones who weren't able to make the event tonight, it will be broadcast as one of the podcasts for Fight Back Radio. So I encourage you to listen to that, and not just listen to the episode tonight, but there are a number of episodes on the fight at UPS and the battle within Teamsters, as well as discussions about the broader labor movement as a whole, and the fight for justice in any number of movements that we are a part of. And I really want to encourage you to check it out. With that, I'm going to end things, and thank you all for joining us. Good night, everybody.
So hopefully that was enlightening to people and gave you some context for this huge, important battle with the Teamsters, with the United Parcel Service. That we're going to put in the show notes some of the things you could hear them talking about, put in the chat about how to join Freedom Road Socialist Organization, or how to contact them, or some of those kind of things. So look for our show notes for that. We encourage you to share this episode with people that have been following the labor movement or the United Parcel Service Teamster battle. We want them to learn about that, and we want to introduce Fight Back Radio to more and more people. We're growing at a good clip, and we're pleased about that. But we always want to grow more. We want to increase our influence, and we want people to hear. We've had just a spectacular guests, I believe, and we want to get that out. Also, I'd encourage people to go back and look at some of our past episodes. If you're interested in the Teamsters, we had a forum from Freedom Road earlier, which with the same guest, but then talking about the build-up to building a credible strike threat. But also we had Richard Blake on earlier in the year, and talking about the Teamsters more in general, and Eliza Schultz, who spoke specifically about the Teamsters and about the LGBTQ caucus and some of the issues faced by LGBTQ people within the Teamsters and the labor movement. So I encourage people to go back, look at those, and our other shows as well, and share this with others. We want people to know about it, as I said. Write a review, give us 5 stars, thumbs up, depending on where you're watching or listening to this. Those are all things that help us. So then finally, I want to thank our production team, who has just been spectacular episode after episode. Natalie Pranis, Dodd McColgan, Shane Tremley, and Vince Olson. So for our entire Fight Back Radio team, I'm Richard Berg saying until next time, all power to the people.